I used to believe that life was a series of choices, each one leading naturally to the next, and that as long as you did what seemed right at the moment, nothing could ever go wrong. I was wrong. I learned the hard way that some choices don't just affect a moment, they echo through years, stretching long after you think they've been buried. I left my family for a younger woman, thinking I was reclaiming my life, my freedom, my happiness. But all I reclaimed was emptiness. Everything I had built, everything I had loved, everything that defined who I was, crumbled under the weight of my own selfishness. For years, my life had seemed perfectly ordinary, stable in the quiet way that only decades of routine can make a life seem. I had been married for nearly 30 years to the woman I thought I would spend my entire life with. We had 2 children, both of them grown, yet still tethered to the home I once ruled with laughter, small arguments, and tender patience. On the outside, everything looked as it should. A warm house, a familiar routine, and a sense of comfort that comes with age and predictability. But inside me, a storm had been quietly building, a storm of restlessness, doubt, and a gnawing feeling that the life I had worked so hard to build was no longer mine. I remember sitting alone one evening, staring at the fading light that spilled through our kitchen window, thinking about how much I had given over the years. How many nights I had gone to bed tired but satisfied, believing that doing my duty, being a provider, a husband, a father, was enough. But it wasn't. Not for me, or at least not for the man I had begun to imagine I could be. Somewhere along the line, the comfort of my life had morphed into boredom. I told myself that I was safe, that I was responsible, that I was honorable. But those words became shackles, reminders of a life that I no longer felt belonged to me. The turning point came quietly, almost unnoticeably, like a shadow creeping across a familiar floor. I met her at a moment when I was already halfway out the door of my own life. She was younger, vibrant, alive in ways I had forgotten existed. Her laughter, her energy, the way she looked at me, it was intoxicating. It wasn't just the thrill of being desired again. It was the illusion of being someone I thought I had lost forever. Young, powerful, free. I told myself it was harmless at first. Just a conversation, just a connection, just a reminder that I existed outside of my duties and obligations. But desire is patient. It waits for the right moment to sink its teeth in, and when it does, it transforms every justification, every rational thought, every moral boundary into dust. I started small, a text message here, a late-night phone call there. Each one innocent, or so I told myself, but each one building a bridge to a life I didn't yet realize would destroy the one I had. I became skilled at hiding the truth from my wife, from my children, from myself. My lies were quiet at first, tiny evasions, little white lies, but they grew until they became the foundation of an entirely new life that I had no right to claim. I felt justified in my actions. I told myself my marriage was stale, my children didn't need me the way they once had, my wife would never understand. I was a man who had given everything for decades and suddenly wanted a taste of what he believed he had been missing. I was greedy, I was foolish, and most of all, I was blind. The decision to leave wasn't sudden, though it felt explosive in retrospect. There was no confrontation, no argument, no dramatic moment of revelation. It was a quiet evening, a calm dinner that ended with a simple, chilling statement. I needed to find myself. I couldn't bear to lie any longer about who I was, I said, but in reality, I was more afraid of facing the consequences of my selfishness than I was of staying. I told my wife that I wasn't happy anymore, that I needed space, that I needed freedom. Her face, pale and trembling, is etched into my mind even now, the combination of disbelief, heartbreak, and silent resignation. My children, young adults already, barely spoke. Their silence was more punishing than any words could have been. They didn't cry. They didn't beg. They just retreated into themselves, leaving me with the first hint of the loneliness that would soon swallow me whole. At first, the life I stepped into felt exhilarating. No responsibilities, no nagging routines, no reminders of the man I had once been. She was vibrant, alive, the embodiment of everything I had imagined I was missing. We laughed, we explored, we imagined a life together that was free from the burdens of history. But the thrill of novelty fades faster than the morning light. Conversations became arguments. Her energy, once intoxicating, became exhausting. Her world, once alluring, was different from mine in ways I hadn't accounted for. Different priorities, different experiences, different expectations. And slowly, imperceptibly, I began to realize that the person I had been running toward was not a person, but a reflection of my own vanity, a mirror to the younger, reckless version of myself I longed to be. The real consequences of my choices didn't hit until I tried to reconnect with the family I had abandoned. My calls went unanswered. My texts were left unread. Birthdays passed, holidays passed. Invitations I had once considered trivial now felt like a cruel joke. One day I stumbled upon a photograph online, a family gathering, smiling faces, a moment frozen in time. My children were there, radiant and alive. I was not, and in that instant, the scale of what I had done fully registered. I hadn't just left a marriage. I had severed myself from the very people who defined my life, who had given me love, who had trusted me without question. And I had replaced it all with a fleeting illusion, a lie I had told myself over and over until I believed it. I think about that night often. The night when realization struck hardest. I was alone in a small apartment, the kind that seemed impossibly empty after a lifetime of family, a lifetime of shared spaces and shared memories. The silence was deafening. There was no laughter, no footsteps, no voices carrying into another room. Just me and the echoes of choices I could never undo. I saw, with a painful clarity, the totality of my mistakes. Freedom had never been mine. The life I had chased had been an illusion, and the only thing left in its wake was a hollow, unrelenting loneliness. Over time, I have tried to reconcile with the man I see in the mirror. He is a stranger in some ways, someone I barely recognize. He is older, yes, but more importantly, he is diminished, not by age, but by decisions. My hair has grayed, my body has weakened, and yet none of that compares to the weight of regret that sits permanently on my chest. I have no one to call on a lonely night, no one to share the quiet moments of reflection that I once shared with those I betrayed. My children, perhaps someday, will forgive, but the years lost cannot be reclaimed. My wife, I do not know if she even wants my forgiveness. And the woman I left everything for, she was not the solution. She never could have been. She was just another chapter, another illusion in a life I refused to live honestly. I often replay conversations in my head, words that were said, words I wish I had spoken, words I will never be able to speak. I remember moments of laughter that now feel like ghosts. I remember the warmth of a family that I abandoned. I remember the evenings when my children's presence was more precious than anything I could have imagined, and I realized too late that I threw it all away for a fleeting sense of vitality, for an illusion of freedom that never truly existed. If there is anything I have learned from this, it is that life is not measured by the excitement of new experiences, the thrill of desire, or the fleeting chase of vanity. Life is measured by connection, by the quiet presence of people who care for you, by the bonds you build through consistency, patience, and love. And when you discard those bonds for selfish reasons, the cost is far greater than you can ever anticipate. So if you are watching this, if you have ever felt restless, invisible, or unappreciated, hear me now. Running does not fix what is broken inside you. Chasing youth, chasing excitement, chasing desire at the expense of the people who have loved you faithfully will leave you empty, silent, and alone. It will leave you with a regret so vast, so heavy, that it will follow you for the rest of your days. You cannot outrun it. You cannot hide from it. You must live honestly or you will pay the price, as I have. And now every night I sit with that price. I eat alone, I sleep alone, I exist alone. And in the quiet, I hear the echo of every choice I made, every lie I told, every person I hurt. It is a sound more deafening than any scream. It is a sound that will never fade. And I carry it with me, not as a lesson, not as wisdom, but as a reminder of the life I destroyed and the man I became in the process. Some mistakes don't announce themselves with a bang. They creep into your life quietly, unnoticed at first, until one day you look around and see that nothing remains of what you held dear. You are left with yourself and the consequences of every selfish desire. And that, I have learned, is a punishment far harsher than anything anyone else could ever impose.